Today on Locked On Rockies, the first weekend of spring training is in the books, and hey, the Rockies offense looking fun.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 24th day of February in the year 2025. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot, because that's what we do around here each and every day, free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. You can fire off your Rockies hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies. Today on the show, of course, we're going to be reacting to the first weekend of Cactus League action, talking a little bit about the Rockies, talking a little bit about what we might have learned. Is there anything we could have learned from this weekend? Is it still too early for everything? We're going to dive into all that and more on today's episode. Before we get into all the fun today, got to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. So here is the deal from spring training. It's early. It's spring training. It's Cactus League. It's the first weekend. It's a super long season. But I will say my main takeaway, I think, is energy. And I know that's a weird way to say it. I know that's like a baseline thing. But there just seems to be a different type of pulse, I think, within the Rockies right now. I think there's a lot of people that within the organization that want to start shifting the narrative, obviously, right? They want to stop this skid. They want the Rockies to get back into a place. But energy is one thing. It has to be backed up with performance. And for the Rockies, if we're going to just go off of this very, 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 very small sample size, there's been a couple of examples of players that I think are really trying to stamp their way into, hey, I'm here to make an impact. It's, we got a little bit of everything from the Rockies in this opening weekend. We got the viral moment of the Rockies allowing 3 runs to score on a sac fly, which is like totally Rockies, right? I mean, you could see that play panning out, right, in the middle of April, really anytime for the Rockies. If a team is going to allow 3 runs on a sacrifice fly, odds are you could put your money on the Rockies. But on the flip side, if we're going to take that and we're going to take that as like, oh, here we go, Rockies again, we're just going to lean into that. Well, then can't we also buy into the fact that out of the 4 games the Rockies have played and 2, there was the split squad on Sunday, the Rockies have scored over 6 runs in 3 or 6+ runs in 3 out of those 4 games. Again, so do we just buy into it's early spring? It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really mean anything, and kind of chalk that up. Same with the error, the issues with the throwing the ball around on the sac fly. Or do we sit there and we say, these are elements that we can kind of focus on, because that defense, those defensive errors, those defensive miscues, like we saw on that play with the sac fly and all those runs scoring, that's the difference maker between a win and a loss in the season. Those type of plays are what set the Rockies down the wrong path to start the season last year. Those type of situations against Arizona specifically, especially if you take yourself back to opening weekend of last year, that type of stuff is what's going to get you in trouble. So that can't, and if defense is going to be the dominating factor for the Rockies this year, if defense is going to be the element that we look at and say that is the Rockies' biggest strength, then you can't have plays like that. Granted, backups were in, different players, all that stuff. I totally understand it. I'm just kind of saying, if we can't just focus on that and ignore the fact that the Rockies offense started off pretty well this spring training. If we're seeing signs of what needs to happen, if we're seeing signs of adjustment, I think the Rockies scoring the amount of runs they have is a good sign. And the way the Rockies are scoring runs as well in this situation, 12 hits, 12 runs for the Rockies, including a big 9th inning. I know that was huge, but still, That's the type of consistency you're hoping for. Brenton Doyle got a big grand slam, of course, and a bunch of guys. Benny Montgomery getting on the board and getting RBI base knocks. Zach Veen, not before hitting the big home run, a hit in a couple of RBI. Sean Bouchard picking up a couple of hits. The right guys are starting off this spring training doing what they need to do. Benny Montgomery, when Benny and Zach Veen have opportunities, they need to perform. And if you're Zach Veen, you're sitting there saying, I got my spring training off to a darn good start. I am the front runner right now. And I talked about energy. He's the type of guy that I think the Rockies need right now. They need a young ball of energy that's a little goofy, but also is going to put up the fun stuff. That bat flip was legendary. It was amazing to see, of course, because it's Rockies in the same game are going viral or I guess the game before. No, same game, I think, because they played. Already the game started to blend together. But the 3-run RBI, the 3-run sac fly happens, right? And then later on, Zach Veen blasts a ball to the stratosphere, launches a bat flip of all time. Apologize for it too. If you thought the bat flip was too much, make sure you go back and watch, because Zach Veen does apologize for how that. And I believe he was talking to reporters after the game, and he was like, "Yeah, I blacked out after I hit that. I don't know what happened," which I love. He's got the purple hair. He's passionate. I've talked a lot about energy guys being an impact. I've talked a lot about how important I thought Gerardo Parra was during the playoff times for the Colorado Rockies. Zach Veen carrying some energy, bringing some life, bringing some pulse, and being successful on the field will bring a nice wave of youth, will help bring that youth movement momentum to the Rockies. It'll help bring that youth energy to the Rockies. It would be very cool to have a guy with purple hair hitting bombs playing right field for the Rockies, a young guy that's been talked about for a while, mixing with the other parts of an exciting outfield. So the energy, I think, around the Rockies and at this camp is starting to bubble up into something a little bit more. This is totally just superfluous stuff. I understand that completely. But I do think that energy, vibes, that type of stuff matters. I think this is a team that is appearing to get to a place where we knew they were a tight-knit team, and they've gone through the ringer the past couple of seasons already before. We've heard about that. There's never really been talks of real locker room problems amongst the organization with the Rockies. But there's not a lot of guys, I don't think, on this team that are maybe kind of as out there. And by out there, I mean out there energy, boom, high, boom. I'm a firecracker, like Zach Veen is. I'm trying to think of who that might be on the roster, but Doyle and Tovar kind of taking a different type of role where Tovar, I think, is so focused on being the consummate professional and being that greatness that he's not focused on kind of being the spark plug in that way. It just wants to be performance, not being someone that has to be the loud talky guy. Same with Ryan McMahon. I don't see Ryan McMahon as that type of leader. Nolan Jones might, has to kind of reinvent himself, and there's too many young guys around there. Jacob Stallings doesn't seem like a big energy guy. And I'm not trying to say that as a mean thing. I'm not trying to say that as a bad thing. I'm just saying those are guys that are like, I'm here to handle business. We're obviously buddies, but my job is to do this. My job is to do that. I think what you're seeing, what we could possibly get from Zach Veen is that little X factor energy of the clubhouse guy that kind of gets people laughing, loosens people up, gets people pumped up in ways that aren't just, I'm going to analyze film, I'm going to watch everything, I'm watching every pitch. Sometimes you need somebody that helps bring a little levity into the locker room. Sometimes you need somebody that's going to make, keep things fun and loose throughout 162 games, plus 30-something spring training games, over 200-something games. If you can have the personality of Veen backed up by his performance, then I think that is going to be something that will provide a nice little spark for this young Rockies team. Again, I'm not sitting here and saying it's the secret sauce that's going to make the Rockies magically an incredible team, the greatest team of all time. No, I'm just saying I think the way that the first thing I'm seeing is, and from hearing from spring training, is I think this team is gelling. I think this team is showing that we got guys that have played together for a bit. We got young guys that have played together for a bit. We got young guys trying to make their way up. We got a team of guys that are looking ready to change what's going on with the Rockies. They have to perform, and they're going to have to do it on the field. They're going to have to back it up, of course. But I think just the way I think the thought processes, I think the mental state of Rockies players is different going into this camp than the last few. It's here's the team, no massive changes to the team, right? Ryan McMahon did go through a season of trades and trade talks and all sorts of other stuff. They just, and this is the first time that they're going through a spring training without Charlie Blackmon. So you need guys like Zach Bean. You need guys to step up and start filling that energy role. I know Charlie probably wasn't going out there and being the biggest goofball around, but he brought a certain vibe and a certain energy to that club that needs to be replaced. And it's not just leadership. The point is, while all this stuff is just behind the scenes type of things, it does make you feel a little bit more. It makes me feel a little more confident in the Rockies. It makes me feel like this team, it does have something in terms of teamwork, togetherness. I think there is something going there, and that matters for teams that are successful. Good relationships amongst the team are important. It's not going to be the only thing. It's not going to be the thing that propels the Rockies into the wild card or into a fight for the division. But I don't think this team is going to roll over as much. I don't think this team is going to sit there and just and be okay with scuffling to go out of the gates. I think there's a lot of people on this Rockies team, and that includes the people on the coaching staff as well, that want to do a lot of proving wrong this year. And your definition of what you need to be proved wrong is probably different from other people. I mean, there's others that say, you're not proving me wrong until you make the playoffs and play actually winning baseball. 70-win season means nothing to me. That doesn't do anything for me. I want to see the Rockies be really successful, truly successful, be competitive. And just winning a handful more games isn't going to convince a lot of people. But there's something about this spring training, and it's maybe me just buying into the new year, but there's when you mix in a couple of different elements, there's just seems to be something a little different with the energy, with the vibes. I can't put I don't have a way to quantify that and put it into a specific thing for you right away. But I do think that I do think that this is a team that has surprise potential, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Let's talk a little bit more about the offense and a little bit more about what we saw this weekend, and talk about pumping the brakes a little bit and reminding ourselves that there is a long, long way to go in this baseball season, including still in spring training. Let's do that after the break. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Maybe you want to maybe you're tuning into the game and you got a hunch and you're like, you know what, maybe I missed out on something. No, they got the live betting there, so you can make sure that you are getting in on the action. Maybe you're feeling confident the next person up to the dish is going to hit a bomb. Well, why not make a little money with FanDuel? The app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We are thanking you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, go listen to our pal Sully on the Locked On MLB podcast. He's breaking down all things from the world of Major League Baseball. We got you covered with the Rockies here. And if you need more Colorado sports coverage, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, and Locked On Buffs available to you as well on your favorite streaming services and on YouTube. Really, really helps when you go support the shows on YouTube. So here, as much as I spent that first segment kind of hyping things up and being excited, because I mean, it's just nice to see, it's spring training. I understand all the situation here. I understand all the context around it. But for the Rockies to open up the spring here by scoring 27 runs over the first 4 games of the season is something that is encouraging. It's something at least that plants the seed of, okay, now how do we make this the norm? How do we reciprocate this? Because at the end of the day, as much as and why I spent so much time talking about vibes as I have, is that's really the best thing that we can go off of, right? I'm not going to sit here and be overly focused on the statistical performance of the Rockies over the first 4 games of the Cactus League of spring training. I'm not going to fall. I'm not going to let myself, get too hyped up on things. But I am going to sit there and say Michael Toglia swinging a bat, so a nice bat to start the season here so far here in spring. Zach Veen, again, continuing to have the strong start. There are things to point at and say, all right, that's pretty good. I'm pretty intrigued by that. I'm looking forward to this and thinking that it's going to be an improvement here. The other thing that we got to talk about, that's still rearing its head, Rockies still striking out quite a bit. Rockies still making their errors on the defensive side. Rockies got blanked by the Athletics there in a game in which we saw a couple of starters play. So there's still a lot of things to pump the brakes on. There's still a lot of things to sit there and say, well, what's going on here? But there is reason. I mean, I do think though that you can't completely ignore it, right? You can't complete if a good spring numbers really don't mean anything. But if the Rockies can get through spring healthy, and the Rockies can get through spring with players starting to start feeling themselves, building up that confidence, and there's going to be and a clear breakout, make the roster type guys start forming. That's a good sign for the Rockies. A good spring is going to springboard someone into the lineup for the Rockies, into the competition, into the spot for right field for the Rockies, and could be launching their career. Plenty of spring still has to come before you can make those decisions. Absolutely. Absolutely. All the stuff really at the end of the day, it's not something we have to be overtly worried or focused on and spend too much time looking into. But if things can carry over, right? If the offense and things are really clicking for people and they can and they can get things going, they can set themselves up to head off into the season in the right way. Because the Rockies, again, it's a road trip against 2 possible playoff teams to start the season for the Rockies. Really interesting group of teams to start the season for the Rockies: Rays, Phillies, Athletics, and Brewers for the Rockies. So you want to get yourself ahead. You want to get yourself ready to go. You want to put yourself in a position that you got to go. The Rays are starting Shane McClanahan coming up on opening day. He's going to be back. I mean, you have no shortage. You don't really have time to kind of sit back on your heels and just say, spring training. For the Rockies, this stuff does matter. This stuff, these type of performances will matter. You got to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position to shake off the starts that you've had the last 2 seasons, and set the tone differently this year. And if the best thing, realistically for me, I would love it if this offense, if this is the offense, if we're gonna see this version of the offense more, which we're seeing, all the pitchers under the sun. So we probably won't. But it's more fun watching the Rockies when they score. It's more fun watching them when they do damage. So it is really difficult, I think, analyzing and focusing in this game of baseball here. How do you make that? How do you translate from the spring to the summer? How do you keep things going throughout the year? I mean, that's what makes it so difficult. And that's what makes it so interesting to kind of analyze spring training, especially early spring training. We got to look at some stuff and we got to take away some stuff. Because what are we not supposed to be impressed by the offensive performance? Are we not supposed to be excited by the fact that the Rockies have started off this spring training by hitting home runs, by scoring runs, by not giving up a ton of runs? The Diamondbacks scoring 8. There's the big blemishes here is only the 8 runs in the first game, and of course being blanked by the Athletics in the split squad. But a 9-3 win against the Diamondbacks and a 6-1 win against the Brewers, if that was regular season, those would be solid wins. Those would be impressive wins. So now, how do you start building that to being the norm? How do you start making it so the Rockies feel confident going up against these good teams and not under just the guise of spring training, and you're going up against anyone from AA guys up to people that are trying to make their mark and make the roster, who signed minor league deals on a new team? Which, by the way, Brendan Rodgers, did you see that one coming? That kind of flew under the radar, I think, for me for a bit. I was wondering, I was so long throughout the offseason, I was so shocked about Brendan Rodgers, and then him to end up on the Astros there as they're doing some stuff. As Altuve is going to go play left field, something like that. So I'm sorry, I know that was completely not related to what I was saying, but it just kind of burst in my brain there. I remember watching that. I was just like, huh, that's where he ended up. That's interesting. We'll see how that pans out. Especially if, there is smoke to that Arenado rumor. Arenado and Rodgers on this. How much time did they play together? Much? Really at all? Had to played a little bit of time together, I think. But anyway, so I guess that is kind of my main takeaway. It's just like, as much as I want to sit here and be like, great, yeah, I'm excited. I like this stuff. How do you start getting it to translate throughout the spring and into the summer? This is where the development side of the Rockies, this is where the development side has to thrive, right? This is where you have to see what are the bad habits that we already are seeing for the Rockies right now. What do we got to break before the season gets started? What do we got to work on before the spring gets started? And same for and that's not just for offense, it's for pitching as well. And again, I've talked a lot about the prove it season, right? Another prove it moment for the Rockies, right? How do you carry over? If you say this momentum holds throughout all the spring training, right? Say the Rockies are still sitting here and how do you take this and carry it through the spring and keep it going? How do you keep putting your players, your team in the best position to win? And those guys, how do they prepare themselves and get themselves ready to go? And put themselves in saying, I'm not scared of these guys. I'm not intimidated of playing the Dodgers. I got to go out. I got to do my job. I have to handle my business. So as much as I think that there are things to be excited for, especially offensively with the Rockies, again, I mean, there's some really interesting stuff here. Brenton Doyle picking up, starting hot with picking up some hits. Ezekiel Tovar picking up a couple of walks there. The Rockies being a little more, disciplined, building some walks, getting things going. Chris Bryant got on the field yesterday, picked up a couple of walks as well. So as things start building and bubbling up and going through, we got to see how the Rockies can maintain what we've seen over this first weekend here throughout spring and how it's going to go. It's the best stuff that the most things I'm excited about are the home runs and the big offense that we've seen so far. And I'm really encouraged by how many young guys are getting playing time so far in this spring training. This is the time. Allow that right field competition to flourish. Allow Zach Veen to have a little prep. What's good about this camp for the young guys is the competition is already on for them. You want to make the club, you want to break out on the club, you want to be the right fielder for the club, you got to perform now. And you got to perform consistently as well to make sure that you show that it's not a fluke and that you're ready for major league action. And there's a lot of guys hungry for that. Shunk back in the mix for the Rockies as well after clearing waivers, got that minor league back with the minor league, but got the invite to camp. So he's back with the Rockies doing stuff. Bouchard, Beck, Veen, Montgomery, all these guys getting on the field already and having a chance to show off what they can do is exactly where we want to be. So a fun weekend to kick off spring training baseball. I've never been able to make it down to Arizona for spring, but I'm really jealous of it. It looks like a nice, that looks like such a great way to start the season off. Go not only enjoy some game and for a lot of us escape the cold, right? But you get to see so many different players. You get to see it's such a different experience, I feel like. And again, haven't been there, but experience for fans to go check out because you get to just see so many players And you get to go see that strike zone thing that we got cooking up here. So that'll be an interesting one as well. I haven't talked a lot about that, but we'll dive more into that topic as well as the spring goes on. And if that I don't know if it's going to go fast enough for them to get it into the majors this year, but we'll see. All right, let's take a quick break and read some comments here from the last week's podcasts. Let's check them out. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Welcome back into Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, you're in the right spot. I thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We were reacting to spring training. We'll be continuing to react to spring training all throughout spring training, of course. But we're going to dive deeper into prospects and who to watch throughout the spring training with Blake Street Banter. Hopefully recording that tonight. So that should be your episode tomorrow, talking about what we saw so far in the spring. And, of course, hyping up some of the prospect names that you all have posted about being excited about. Let's go through here and talk through some of the comments that we are seeing from the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. Here's what Richard has to say. This was about the Rockies adding to their bullpen. Interesting point. I'm also curious, what year are you referring to when the Rockies were actually good at moving players before the deadline? I can't really think of a time when they picked up a player, then flipped them at the deadline for prospects as part of a rebuild. Last year would have been a perfect opportunity with Rogers, Cave, and Quantrill, but they didn't make a move. Seems like a pattern at this point. It is the norm for them. Very true. But there was the year with I believe it was 2022 into the 2023 season, where the Rockies made, I believe it was seven moves, basically. And again, it's not necessarily that the Rockies were let's see, trades Rockies. Let's see if I can pull this up. Let's see. Anyway, they claimed some people like Brent Suter, for example, and they were able to make some moves in which they added some players, and it hasn't done it. It was more just a quantity of moves, not necessarily a quality of moves overall. But that's where I was referring to, was back in that 2022 to 2023 kind of small window where they were showing, hey, we're going to sell at this deadline. We're going to move some people at the deadline. We're going to move some pieces in the offseason as well. Going into that. So that's the one I was referring to there. Certainly not the standard, certainly not the norm for the Colorado Rockies there. So you are right there, Richard. Let's see. All right. Let's see. What do we got next? Okay. Let's see here. Joel says, I still wonder if we're going to see the occasional spot start of KB on third. If Rymack keeps slipping and KB is actually healthy for a few games, then it may drive both. Haven't heard any rumors about that. Haven't heard any discussions about that. Maybe I don't know if that's necessarily the best spot for his back, but I'm kind of in the camp of any defensive spot ain't good for Chris Bryant's back, and should primarily focus on him being an offensive threat. But you never know. Desperate times could call for desperate measures. Let's see here. Kyle, I think, says if the Rockies were to trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., that would be the worst trade ever. Vladdy will not re-sign with the Rockies. He wants to win, and they are little ways from that. If they made that trade and gave up all their best prospects and Vlad leaves and the Rockies are worse off than they are now. Absolutely. I think the idea, if you were to go out and get Vladdy, had to be with the idea that you're going to sign him after that. Jack says, we are back. And let's see. Jonathan says Nolan Jones is OP. Had a great comeback in late 24. So underrated. Man, we're really hoping for that. That's going to be the big difference maker. I think he can be someone that can change the entire landscape of the season for the Rockies if he can contribute the way that he contributed his rookie season. FNL Aviator says, I miss the days when the Rockies were playing competitive baseball in the regular season because they knew they had a shot, and the club we had to face was the D-backs. They were there in 07 and 17 where we played critical games in the playoffs with different outcomes, but those games were epic. Unlike now, even if it's a low-key spring training game. Yeah, I feel you, man. As you heard me in that crossover episode, I'm very jealous of how the D-backs have panned out and how they've been able to really grow into a team that I do think keep your eyes on the D-backs. They had a really great offseason, I think, this year. They had something where they got something cooking. And then finally, Useless Trucker says, I'm just blown away by the Rockies pitching. Again, keep your eyes peeled on that. It's easy to think that it's not in the good spot, but it really is. What does healthy Senza, the return of healthy Senza and healthy German Marquez bring to the team? It's such a massive question for this team, and it's going to be something that's going to be a huge storyline for the Rockies going forward, especially with German Marquez and his contract situation. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Folks, how are you feeling about the first weekend of spring training? What's on your mind? What are you thinking about? You got to let me know in the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section below. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel as well and liking the videos. It's a huge help to the show. And folks, for your second listen of the day, go check out Locked On MLB with our guy Sully. Or if you need more Colorado sports coverage, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, and Locked On Buffs. Free and streaming on your favorite streaming services. Until next time, I'm Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.